Coming off a career year in 2022, can Quinnen Williams continue to perform at an all-pro level? The answer is yes, and we'll discuss why today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Thursday, August 17th, 2023, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so that you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help us out and help other Jets fans find the show. Today, I come to you from the beautiful village of Nafpatkos, Greece, right on the Gulf of Corinth. And today, we're going to continue our discussion with Michael Nania. Yesterday, Michael and I spoke about the Jets' offense. Today, we're going to preview the Jets' defense. So let's jump right into the talk about the Jets' defense with Michael Nania.
Let's talk about the defense. And on the defensive line, Quinnen Williams is clearly the guy. Best season of his career in 2022. So let me ask you this, and I have a strong feeling on this. Do you think that was just a career year, maybe he falls back to earth, or do you think that was the start of the ascension of Quinnen Williams?
I mean, I think you always have to be a little, skeptical that when a career year happens like that, maybe it was an outlier. But I feel like he's kind of been on the precipice of that for a while because his 20 and 21 seasons, there were flashes of the way he played last year. There were stretches of games where he played or performed just at the same level he was last year. It's just that 22 was the first season where he did it throughout the entire season. Not just, I think 2020 he finished strong. In 2021 he started hot, but he didn't play well for the entirety of those seasons. 22 he did that. So I think we still have to see, can he do it again? But being as young as he is and knowing the talent level that he had coming out, I feel pretty confident he's going to be this good again. Another step, could happen for sure. I just think it would be amazing, but I think he is capable of replicating this. But we will see. I mean, are you skeptical that there could be a drop off, or no? You're not.
I think it's going to be great. Now, look, the numbers may not be as good, but like the numbers, his numbers were so good last year that I wouldn't be surprised if there was like some small decline. I kind of feel like this was just like him starting to put it together. And I think, like you said, I think people totally slept on his first couple of years. I don't think people appreciated how. I think Quinnen Williams paid for the sins of a lot of Jets past defensive linemen who never got quite as good as people were hoping for. And I think like people thought, oh, it's another Leonard Williams or it's another, Wilkerson. Although Wilkerson was great for the first couple of years, but I think people had just been like so frustrated with these interior defensive linemen who never were quite as good as they were supposed to be. And even though Quinnen Williams showed a lot of promise, I think people kind of tuned it out and they thought, here we go again. I just think his game is so refined where, he pass rushes with the plan. And, and that's the reason I just think everything he does is sustainable. I don't think this is a case where he just got a bunch of lucky sacks. He just wins. And if a defensive lineman stalls him, he's got a counter. And I think, look, again, the numbers may not be quite as good, but I think he's going to stay a great player. I think he's going to play like, if not on an all-pro level, close to it. So that's my view on it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And that's a fantastic point because there's always, whenever a player has a great season, you can look at it and say, like, did he just put up good production? Like, it wasn't necessarily sustainable the way he got to it, or did he get to it in a way where you can envision this continuing consistently in the future? And the way Quinnen was great this year was not guys flushing unblocked, the quarterback being flushed into him or getting coverage sacks or things like that. It was dominant wins with technique for the most part. And he's always been a great athlete, but I think this year what put him over the top is that he finally figured out consistently I'd win with technique, having a plan, as you said, having counters, and just having a very wide repertoire of moves. I think he had all that this year, and it took him some years to fully master it. He always had the flashes, but you put it all together. So those are things that you can maintain going forward. And being as young as he is, the physical tools aren't going anywhere for the duration of the contract he just signed. So I feel good that he's going to continue playing well. There's never been any indication of him being a guy who has, issues with, and sometimes it comes out of nowhere, because I don't remember this with Wilkerson either. But he hasn't seemed to have issues with being motivated and continuing to play his hardest. So I feel pretty confident he's going to keep it going.
Who do you think is the second best defensive lineman on the team?
I would say Franklin Myers. I think Franklin Myers takes that right now because of his two-way ability. I think he's a great edge setter, and he also brings that pass rushing ability on the interior on passing downs. I don't think anyone else on the D-line has the same two-way ability as Franklin Myers right now, so I would go with him. But, maybe this is year Johnson puts it together and makes a play to be that kind of player. And then if you like passing game impact, maybe you can argue for Huff because he was so efficient last year. Maybe Lawson can get back to his 2020 levels this year, but I would go with JFM. Do you agree with that?
I do agree. That's who I was going to choose. So yeah. I guess we're disappointing. One of the pieces of feedback I always get on this show is you should bring on guests who disagree with you. And, I guess we agree with this on this one. I think I do, though. I think it's just like people are like I mentioned First Take a little bit earlier. I think like people are used to like disagreeing, but you're screaming at each other trying to have like the hottest take, whereas like you can't have like a just regular conversation about where you make points in a civil fashion, which is like what I like to do. I think you hit the nail on the head, though. And they didn't really use him much on the inside last year, but I think that's there this year. And I think maybe with Rankins gone this year, they'll slide him inside more on passing downs. I do think, the guy who I think could break out is at some point Lawson generates pressures at such a high. There's going to be a 10-sack season at some point in his career, and maybe it'll be this year, and maybe it'll be with so much talent on this defensive line. I feel like it's inevitable. It's got to happen.
Yeah, and it's like there are reasons to understand, like, okay, maybe he's not the greatest finisher in the world because he does have short arms, and sometimes his technique in bringing guys down isn't the best, but it is pretty odd to this point that he hasn't had, that the sacks have been so low, because his pressure is relative to the number of sacks he has is, one of the widest disparities in the league, and that goes throughout his whole career. So I'm curious to see how he does this year. I'll be honest, going into the offseason, I was kind of an advocate of cutting him just because I think the cap space relative to his production last year was worth it. And knowing the Jets had a lot of other needs to fill, including tackle, which they did not address. But now that he's here and I know he's coming back and, he took a pay cut, I'm very excited to see how he plays, because I think second year coming back off that Achilles, and we know that, he was barely recovered going into last offseason because he had the second surgery after the 2021 season was over. I think there's a chance, especially still being as young as he is, there's a chance for him to be even more productive than he was last year, because he was good last year. But in 2020, I saw a guy who was like, despite his sacks, he was dominant that year. And I think he can get closer to that in the second year after recovery.
Yeah, it's kind of like the opposite of what we talked about with Quinnen Williams. Is Lawson getting 10 sacks going to be sustainable? But I feel like just like his game is he's going to run into a 10-sack season at some point.
Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Nutrafol. Men think losing their hair is inevitable. Take control of your hair's future with Nutrafol's science-backed hair growth supplement for men. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated, natural science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free, patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your sexual health. Go to Nutrafol.com/men to take their hair wellness quiz. Identify causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting root causes of thinning, such as stress, hormones, environment, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism through whole body health. And it works. In a clinical study, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months taking Nutrafol men's hair growth supplements. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's Nutrafol/men, promo code LOCKEDONNFL.
Let's move on to the corner group. So this is an interesting. So let me give you my theory on Jets corners, and let's see if you agree with this. Obviously, everybody knows Sauce Gardner's amazing. I would say he's one. We will debate heavily if you don't think Sauce Gardner's one of the top 3 corners in the NFL right now. So please tell me you think he's one of the.
I don't disagree with that. No, he's up there.
So I want to call DJ Reed underrated. But then, I also look at Michael Carter II, and he's even, maybe more underrated than DJ Reed because, you look at DJ Reed, and it's okay, Sauce gets all the headlines. But then there's some spillover to DJ Reed, and nobody notices Michael Carter II is a really good slot corner.
Yeah, I think, both guys are pretty underrated around the league because, there are guys who made the Pro Bowl this year who are much less productive than Reed was this season. And that kind of applied last year, too, when he was with Seattle. Reed is very underrated. I think having him next to Sauce, again, I agree with you, Sauce is top 3, but the fact that there is another very good corner opposite him definitely helps. Both guys complement one another. But Reed does a lot of things well. He doesn't rack up big interception numbers, and because of his size, I don't know if he ever will, but regardless of that, he plays the ball great for guys' size. He's a very good athlete. He's smooth. He's got good speed. His hops are great, which you saw in the one interception he did have last year. And that allows him to play with bigger guys, like on that Cortland Sutton deflection he had, I think he's 6'4". So he uses a lot of athletic tools. His technique is good. He tackles well underneath. So he's a very good, well-rounded player. And Carter II as well is not a guy who gets mentioned in those national discussions, but it really is a cornerback trio, not just a duo. I think Carter's game is not really flashy in any way, but he makes the tackles in his area that he needs to make. He executes his zones really well and doesn't blow coverages that a lot of other slot corners might. So he's just not just as solid, but he's a big part of it. And we've seen a lot of bad slot corner play with the Jets over prior to Carter's arrival. So we know how damaging it could be to have a struggling slot corner. And the fact that we barely ever notice Carter is a testament to just how solid he is at executing his role.
The rare case where the sequel is better than the original. If you didn't get the reference listening out there, that's reference to Michael Carter and Michael Carter II. I was thinking about Reed though, and I was trying to think through the years of recent Jets free agent signings. So 98, they signed Curtis Martin and Kevin Mawai. So you get 2 Hall of Famers in one offseason, which are one of the great free agent classes in NFL history. But so we can leave that out. But let's go to 1999, the year after that. I don't know if I could come off when you factor in the quality of the player, when you factor in the value of the position, when you factor in the salary. I've really struggled to come up with a better free agent signing than DJ Reed since 1999 for this team.
Yeah, at least in my memory, I think Reed's got to be up there, and it's been a rough go at it in free agency. And there have even been some players who maybe had one good year, and we'll see if Reed can go beyond that. But there's not a lot of competition there. I think Reed is everything you hope to get in a free agent, a guy who, he was a breakout player in Seattle. He showed promise. You hope he can maintain that, but he's not an established star. So his price is high, but not superstar high. Then he comes in and he lives up to that. And now I feel like even on a pretty good salary, they're still getting strong value because he was so productive and he's young and you feel like he can maintain it. So, I would, at least since I've been paying attention past decade plus, I think Reed is number 1 for now. We'll see if he can maintain it.
Right. That's the key, is always the second year. Then you got this, I think the weak points of the defense, or at least relatively speaking, are the safeties and the linebackers. And look, hey, I say this all the time. If I can only be good 2 spots on defense, I want to be good at defensive line and corner, and the Jets are very good in those spots. I don't think they're terrible at linebacker. I think if, Adrian Amos plays well at safety, they could be okay at safety. I think it's just a group that is what it is. They CJ Mosley plays the run well. I think he knows where to drop in zone coverage. I think if you need him to match up against a good tight end, you're going to be in trouble. Quincy Williams, I call him like the home run hitter who, hits a lot of home runs, but also strikes out a lot.
Yeah.
And then the safety, maybe Tony Adams will save us. But I mean, what are your thoughts on these two positions?
Well, I think the most important thing is what you mentioned to start, the fact that, look, the positions that have the most impact on defense are the D-line and the corners, and the Jets are elite at those two spots. And I think you saw last year that, the impact of those two position groups can outweigh struggles at the other positions and still make you a great defense, because, the safeties last year were, it was pretty bad. I would say it was one of the worst safety groups in the league probably. And the linebackers were, I think Mosley was solid, but, Quincy Williams improved as well, but still probably average. And Quan had a good year, but, despite those two units not being the greatest, I think they were still able to be elite because, if your pass rush is great and your corners are great, you're going to play a good defense, even if there are some occasional other issues because of what's going on linebacker and safety. So I think that's what's most important. I think the defense is structured the right way, and the Jets have invested in the right positions. They've put a lot of first round picks and money into that D-line, into the cornerback unit, and they've trusted their development at the safety and linebacker position. So I think that's the right philosophy. But we'll see how it pans out, those two positions. I like that Tony Adams has already established himself as the starting free safety because, Whitehead and Amos are not ideally suited to play that role. Adams is, but we'll see if he can maintain the way he played at the end of last year. I like what he showed, and we'll see if he can build on it. And then linebacker, starting duo I think is solid with Mosley and Williams, but can Jamie Sherwood match what Quan did in that third linebacker role? That's the big question there.
I'm a Sherwood believer. I don't think I've seen some concern over this, but I feel like, for a number 3 linebacker, which is really kind of a part-time player, he's kind of a role player in this system. I don't think it's that crazy to think maybe Sherwood can handle that role.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he has the potential to match what Quan did last year. It's very curious to me why I thought they should have re-signed Quan because I really liked how he played. Seemed like he was a good presence in the locker room, and I don't know why he got paid so little because it really feels like he's better than that. But regardless, I think, Jets have a lot of guys in the staff who are experienced with linebackers, Saleh, Ulbrich, especially. Both of them have backgrounds at that position and were successful as linebacker coaches. I think they trust what they can do with young talent there, and they've been grooming Sherwood for 3 years now. And Mosley's been involved in helping him develop as well. So I think they feel like he's seasoned and ready to contribute. I think he's a different player than Quan. He's not as aggressive or as much of a force as I think Quan showed he was last year. I think Sherwood is closer in play style to Mosley, like a more patient linebacker who uses his smarts and anticipation. But so we'll see if it works out this year. I think he played really good in the very small sample he played last regular season, but got to keep it going.
I feel like, and this is my theory, maybe it's wrong, but I feel like their kind of like lackadaisical attitude towards Quan maybe suggests that they really do think Sherwood can fill this role. Because sometimes who you pursue and who you don't pursue tells you a lot about the internal improvements you're expecting.
Right, and I think safety, you can say that as well, with the lack of pursuit of a free safety. It was a sign of confidence in Tony Adams. That's something I theorized early. Like, the only way this can make sense is if they like Tony Adams. And it looks like that is the case because Adams is already getting those first team reps, was benched in the Hall of Fame game, didn't play, which is a sign that he's viewed as a starter. So yeah, that's definitely one way you could look at, one way you could read between the lines and see how a team values certain players.
And then we can just briefly talk about the kicking game to close. It's really nice to go into the season and actually be confident in the kickers the Jets have, where, you have Morstead is back, and he's my new best friend because he was on the podcast a few weeks ago. And then Greg Zuerlein, who's, every offseason, like I say, it's really easy. It should be really easy to find a kicker because there's always a good one available. You don't have to pay a lot of money to. And the Jets, of course, never sign any of them, and they bring in these guys who just can't kick. And people are like, "See, it's not that hard." I'm like, "No, they should have." I didn't say they could just sign anybody. I said they should have signed a good kicker. And then Last year, they finally signed a good kicker in Greg Zuerlein, and he was cheap, and he was good.
Yeah, that was always one of my pet peeves. Like, I don't get it. Like, there's always some veteran out there who's made 80%, 85% of his kicks or whatever, and he's just sitting there, and the Jets don't sign him. But they get Taylor Bertolet and Ross Martin and Matt Amendola, all these random guys. I guess they were trying to shoot for, maybe trying to find the long-term solution, but like, just don't take risks at kicker. And they finally didn't last season. And Zuerlein wasn't amazing. He missed some kicks, but overall he was solid. He was competent. He brings distance to the table, which is a nice asset. He's good on kickoffs. And Morstead, I think, is, despite his age, he was still one of the top punters last year, and there's no signs of slowing down. So it is really nice to have no drama at the punter and kicker spots and since I was trying to think of this, since I started watching in 2011, I think this might be the first time there's no drama at these two positions, at least in terms of feeling like both guys are definitely going to be at least average.
I think there's something to that, like they're trying to figure out the long-term solution thing, because I remember in 2021, Morstead was here when Braden Mann was hurt. He was pretty good, and I was thinking, like, this guy's better than Braden Mann. Why don't they just keep him and get rid of Braden Mann? And I think they just wanted to find they just wanted to say, we want this position settled for the next 10 years. So they went with the young guy, even though he wasn't as good.
Yeah, I mean, the punters and kickers can go so deep into their career that, like, Greg Zuerlein is 35. He can kick here the next 5. I mean, maybe because he's a leg strength based guy, maybe not for him particularly, but they go so old. That's like, just get someone good, and they can give you multiple years.
All right. Well, any final thoughts? Anything? You're going to be the voice of the people and yell at me about something. Any insights you need to share with us before we call it a day?
I don't think I have anything to yell about. I mean, maybe you're, the criticisms of you bringing on people you agree with, maybe they're correct, because, like, other than, maybe I was a little higher than you on Conklin, and maybe I lean towards the preseason sitting guys, sitting your starters in the preseason a little bit more. Other than that, we were pretty much in lockstep. So I don't know. I think there's something to be said for that. Great minds thinking alike. Maybe that's just how it goes.
Maybe my points are just so brilliant that they're impossible
yeah.
to debate, right?
Exactly.
But we did get Conklin praise on the podcast, so that's a very good thing. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to having you back during the season.
Yeah, I can't wait to be back again.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks again to my friend Michael Nania of JetsXFactor.com for joining us. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, give the show a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the show. Have a great Thursday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.